Hello, everybody. This is Monica 20, your host of Transcend with M podcast. And I am super excited to have Heather Leah with us today. She is amazing. She's an accomplished and a strong businesswoman. Heather wanted to create and attract the most important aspects of women. And I don't know her story because we recently met, but in the little conversations we've had, I know we're going to have an amazing episode ahead of us based on what I learned so far about Heather. She actually, her journey involves 9 marriage proposals. Is that what, you know, is that what we're going to talk about today? Are you going to go deep in that, Heather? Do you think?
Good. Well, I think what we're going to talk about is our love story, which is a common thread for all of us as women.
I love it. And then we're going to talk about your book, which is he Mr. Right or Mr. Right now? I love it. So, welcome Heather into the show. I really appreciate you taking the time of your busy day to be here with me and to share your story with everyone that listens to us on a weekly, on a daily, on a monthly basis, even if it's just once a year, because we believe we can change, someone's path with anyone's and especially woman's story. So, who's Heather and what is her story?
Monica, thank you so much. I feel like my story is like so many other women's stories in
Yeah.
that, you know, were you raised watching Disney movies and this
Yeah.
romance of Cinderella or Snow White, right? Or Sleeping Beauty? You're just waiting for that Prince Charming to come kiss you and wake you up, right?
Yeah.
So, Disney has done an amazing job along with the rom-coms, and all the romance novels and then there's been, the religious influences on our love stories.
Yeah.
There's been our cultural influences on our love stories.
Yeah.
So all of us as women have had these expectations, right?
Mhm.
Of how we're supposed to be in a marriage or how we're supposed to be in a relationship, right?
Yeah.
Or how we're supposed to be in our church,
Um,
right? So,
yeah.
and all of those things have influenced not just me, I think they've influenced everybody, right? I call those
Mhm.
our key influencers and influences. And sometimes we don't even realize what's influencing our love story. So, one of the things I write about is honestly some of the history. So, women not allowed to, be in the workplace, as with my grandmother. Women not allowed to take jobs. And so that has also shaped the way that we have had to interact early on in some relationships. And so some of that gets passed down, right, from grandmother to mother to daughter and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So what happened for me, and we talked about resiliency for women,
Yeah.
was in my family, there wasn't a lot of, conversation about relationship. I just watched my parents in very traditional roles.
Yeah.
And my dad didn't want my mother to work. And, she just was relegated to being a caretaker of myself and my three siblings. So that was my role model. All right. But then I get a college degree, which many of your listeners have put themselves through school or they have done well for themselves, right?
Mhm.
And so now here I am with my, education, and I get into my first relationship and we're acting in those same old traditional roles that have
Mm,
been handed down from our families because we didn't know any different. We
right.
didn't have the language, right? We didn't have the distinctions to examine our thinking that is this really my relationship
Mhm.
or is this a love story that's been handed down to me? What's really running my love bus?
Yeah.
And it didn't go well. There was a lot of pain and agony, both of us. And I call it in my book, the unconscious masquerade. That's the chapter in my book called the unconscious masquerade, because I was masquerading as a preacher's wife. That's what,
Interesting.
yes.
Okay.
And I say masquerading because that was like the role that was placed on me to be a certain way, right? But in my heart of hearts, Monica, I wanted to not live, okay? I didn't want to be here because
Mm,
it was so foreign to anything that I knew, and it
yeah.
felt so, it didn't feel good, you know?
Okay.
And I think some of the listeners here, some of the women might have been in relationships that don't feel so good, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, I call that the unconscious masquerade because I really had to look at, my own thinking around divorce.
Mm,
Okay. Because there's thoughts in the church that if you get divorced, right, that's a sin. There's also
mhm.
some thinking in churches that if you get divorced, you can't remarry. So, I'm
Yeah.
in my 20s grappling with these conversations and these beliefs that have been handed down. And I'm trying to figure out for myself, well, then is it okay to get divorced? But then am I going to live my life alone the rest of my life?
Mhm.
You know? So, anyways, my first marriage did end up in a divorce. And oh my gosh, I felt like my arm had been severed. I cried for a year and a half because I just was trying to figure out, right? How, what do I do next? And, anyways, my own journey, I kept on thinking to myself, it's my love story, it's nobody else's, just like every other woman, right? And so I had this group of people judging me for getting a divorce. And I don't know if your listeners have been judged for their relationship choices, for
Yep.
either who they chose to marry, chose to date, or chose to marry and divorce, right?
Yep. Yep. I was
And
divorced at age 18.
at 18,
I was already divorced.
uh-huh.
Got to tell you that story later.
I'd love to hear it. And the self-judgment that we impose on ourselves after something like that happens. One of the things I write about is I had this belief that nobody would want me because I was a divorcee and I had a toddler. And so how do you pick yourself back up, right? After you have not only had other people inflict their judgment on you for your choices, but then the judgment that most people will do internally, right? That can be the most damaging. So now I am on my journey, right? And I took a course called Return to Love. And this was a long time ago on my journey, but I took that course, Return to Love, and it restored me back to my heart where I could open the doors on my heart again and not only love and forgive myself, but be able to, love again and have a relationship. The other thing I thought about,
Love that.
Monica, and
Love
I
that.
like my first chapter is called A Gold Medal in Love. Okay. And the reason why I called it that is I thought, if I was an Olympic athlete and I was running, let's just say I'm running a marathon, right? If I tripped and fell, would everybody tell me, don't get up again? Would they tell me to stop? Or would they encourage me to keep going for the gold? And I thought, we're not even handed a trainer. Olympic athletes train for hours every day. Olympic athletes have the best of the best coaches at their side, right? They usually have some pretty great champions in their corner. But from a love perspective, men, women, it doesn't matter, right? There's not this wonderful map, right, that lays out how we should be in relationships. But boy, if we fall down and we're not perfect, there's hell to pay, right? And could be very damaging for people. And I thought, no, it's my love story. This is what I want. How do I create this? How do I figure out how to get my arms around the tools of how to create a really great love story? So that's what set me on my journey, was how do I go about getting a gold medal in love?
I love that. I think that we sometimes beat up ourselves too much. But what, I guess the question that I have for you, you know, what, I guess, what and who kept you going for that gold medal? Like, was it you, your mind, after you healed by taking that course of, let's just go get it? Or did you have a village around you that actually lift you up and help you? Was it a combination of both? Did you put a goal for yourself that says, hey, this is, I am going to break with the biases. I'm going to break with what I know. I'm going to challenge myself to do something different. Like, what happened that changed that mindset, right? Because it's really hard. It's really hard. Sorry, I know that was like 25 questions in
Yeah.
one statement. I
Yeah. And that's quite all right, Monica, because, I love the name of your show, Transcend with M, right? And you are 100% correct. It is a mindset, right?
yeah.
It's a mind shift. And so when I took that first course on a return to love, right?
Hmm.
What I started getting introduced to is my thinking, and actually paying more attention to my thoughts, right?
Hmm.
And one of the things that I have been able to do, and people understand this, it's in your intention, right? it's
Yeah.
it's creating a conscious intention of something you want to do, and keeping that in front of you, and then taking the necessary steps to get to that.
Hmm.
um, at this particular time, I read a book called Creative Visualization, and it was written by a woman by the name of Shakti Gawain. And there was a part in that book about developing your intuition and being able to listen more to your inner knowing instead of everybody else's, I'm going to say projections, everybody else's commentary, everybody else's, way of doing things, and being able
Yeah.
to separate and establish my own authority inside of me.
Hmm.
So there really wasn't a cheering section. What I would do is I put myself in some coursework and in some courses that would give me the tools to be able to get more curious about the men I was dating, ask better questions, develop my emotional capacity, right? To sit with more tough questions, to be able to explore another individual and myself and my own preferences, right? To figure out, are we a match or are we not a match? And yeah, is that a helpful answer?
Yeah, I think it's more, understanding and becoming one with yourself. Like it's understanding who you really are and what you really want and who you really want to be, not just on your own, but with someone, right? Because,
Mhm.
sometimes we become someone else just to please others, right? But who are we with that other person, right? Like, who do we want to be? Like, we don't have to sacrifice who we are. Either take me whole or not at all. And we evolve together, right? I think that's the most important part, is that we have to be open to evolve together. Like, I have that conversation with my husband frequently on, we are not the same person we were 18 years ago, you know?
Mhm.
We we are two totally different people. We always been, but we have evolved as a couple. We have evolved as parents. We have evolved as ambitious professionals, right? Um, but it's understanding you don't have to give in into someone else's, idea of you. You have to give in into your own idea of you by communicating where do you want to be, who do you want to be, what is that you like, not like, all these things. So so tell me 9 proposals, because we're talking about dating, right?
Yes.
And we're talking about exploring. And we're talking about understanding and putting yourself through more. Uh, it's like, when you're interviewing for like a higher up position where you have to become more prepared depending on the person that you are interviewing with, right? So I feel like you went through that process, but like finally to find out like who is really Heather, not who was really the person you wanted to be with, but who was gonna be Heather in that relationship. Am I off?
You're not off because I think you touched on it earlier in the previous conversation that you were sharing, the part you were sharing, and that is a lot of history, right, has really informed women to have to shape their lives so that way they support their husbands. So there's been a lot of, I'm going to call it hand-me-down thinking, right? And just watch Pride and Prejudice. Just watch some of the movies, right? They're busy telling the women to look all beautiful and you need to look pretty and you need to have this, right? And you need to do whatever they say. And I mean, just there's a lot of very old programming that has been, hand down to some generations, and some of that is slowing because I'm very encouraged by the younger generations making more choices that fit them, instead of choices that fit somebody else. And I still have conversations with women that say they're afraid to get in a relationship because they don't want to lose themselves. And that's exactly what happened in my first marriage, because I realized that who I was missing was me, right? That I didn't even recognize who I was anymore. And so you are 100% correct, Monica, on that journey was to figure out, what are the things I want? What are my goals, right? And how do I create and attract a match? Meaning, how do I get really clear about what it is I want, what I'm looking for? And when I meet somebody who appears to be a match, how do we dance with each other in such a way that we can clarify, yes, we really are, or I'm just Mrs. Right Now and he's just Mr. Right Now, and we, lovingly find a time to part and move on. Yep. Now the 9 marriage proposals, one of the things, and we're talking about a journey as a woman, right? One of the things I talk about in my book is there is nothing more attractive than a woman who's in love with her own life.
Yeah. I like
Nothing more.
that.
There is nothing more attractive than a woman who's in love with her whole life. I'm sitting here looking at you. You are all lit up. You're all lit up. You're extremely, like you said, you're working on your passion project. There's nothing more attractive than a woman who's all lit up, living her passion.
Yeah.
And what I have found on that journey is sometimes men, right, have been very attracted because they want that. And they think marrying you, they will get that. But what you realize on your journey is that no, it's not over here, right? You
Yeah.
need to be on your own journey. You need to be doing your own healing.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to be just as in love with your life, because the love in my life isn't going to necessarily transfer.
Right. Right.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And if women find themselves very in love with their lives, and then they do get married, but that person's not in love with theirs, sometimes their own light starts to diminish a little bit because they feel depleted because of that energy drain.
100%. 100%. So, what are your primary influences, and what has been the primary influence in your love story not to give in back into what it was before?
I would have to say my grandmother.
Okay.
She is actually, I think, in chapter 3. It's such an animated lady. I mean, my grandmother was just all that. I mean, I think we swear that she settled the West in a covered wagon and, fought off everybody to get there, right? Um, so, for example, when the great grandchildren came along and we were trying to teach them to say great grandma, she said, no, just stop at great. so, anyways, she was two things, Monica. When she went through 2 divorces, and I was 5 years old when she was going through her second divorce, and we drove from California to Florida to pick her up and bring her back to live with us in California. And in the car, and again, you're so impressionable, right, at such a young age. She said, always own your own home so you can throw them out of it. Yes. That was the influence, right? That was her experience. That's the way she felt towards men because she was always dependent upon them for money.
Mm.
And then when she came to California and had her own job and her own home, right, she just was really a lot more in her element. So there was an influence, right, for a long period of time where I always owned my own home. I always owned it, right?
Yeah.
Because grandma said, always own your own home. So on my journey, I had to learn how to become a partner, how to become a better partner, how to I had to learn how to quit mothering, how to quit caretaking, how to quit being over responsible. Okay. So that my partner could show up and bring their best gifts.
Okay.
Yep. And so there that was too in my grandmother, because my grandmother knew, like a lot of your listeners, we are very ambitious women.
Yeah.
We have a lot of things. and so it's really different. Women have about 2.5% more women are getting degrees every single year than men.
Mm-hmm.
More and more women have their own independence and financial, stability. And so they don't need somebody to financially care for them.
Right.
And so it's bringing this whole conversation up to, hey, we don't need each other for money. And Monica, you hit it right on the head. We need each other so we can evolve together, so that we can co-create bigger things together, so that we can support each other individually and collectively.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. 100%. And so those are the kind of powerful partnerships I think that more and more women want. And so they're trying to figure out how to create those when a lot of times they've been independent.
Awesome. How, after heartbreak, I guess, and after disappointment, how do you give your heart again? How was that journey?
After dating a lot, and as you can see, there's been several proposals, and like I said, some of those have come because I think people just saw that I was in love with my own life and they wanted to be a part of that, but it just wasn't a match. It got to a point for me that I started to doubt my own ability, because I had dated so much, and I thought, am I ever really going to find somebody who's a match? And so I decided to give my heart a break, and I talk about that in chapter 11. And I took off. I make a joke about it. You've heard of sober October, right? And you've heard of dry January. Well, I said I had to do March without men.
More more the dry January than the
Right.
October. Usually here is Oktoberfest. We don't do those things.
So I made a joke about it and I decided, something, I'm going to do a whole year without dating. And so I made that commitment to myself so that, as you and I talked about earlier, I wanted to spend the time very much in my own skin going, what is it do I want? What are the things I'm looking for in a partner? I wanted to get extremely clear about what I wanted. Okay. And what and so even the smallest things, Monica. So I ended up creating a list of 122 things. Okay. 122. That's how explicit I was. So, for example, my daughter was grown and already in college. And so I wanted my partner to have, if they had children, that their children loved them, wanted them to be happy, but also were living on their own. All right. I mean, I was that specific about what I was looking for and what I was willing to, get into a partnership relationship, with. So that whole year I was off, I created all those things that I was really interested in. But I also spent a lot of time looking at relationships and looking at my past relationships and going, what did I like? What worked, what didn't work? So I use that as kind of sifting and sorting through my own preferences. And I also talk about that whole process there. But have you ever, have you heard of the law of attraction? Are you familiar with that?
I've heard of it,
Mhm.
but I haven't really talked to anyone about it in probably like couple years.
Couple
So
years?
yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
I have to be honest.
That's no worries, no worries. I have found throughout my whole life that I've been able to, with my intentions, create specific things. So, like, for example, I created a job working overseas for 4 years. Very intentionally laid out the right nanny to attract for my daughter. I've worked with people in visualizing lawsuits dropped against their businesses. And so the laws of creation or the laws of attraction are things I've used all my life. I just didn't apply it to my own personal love story. And I thought, if I can create a car, if I can create a job, if I can create a transfer over to Europe, then can I apply this to the love of my life, right? So I created a vision book and started envisioning this wonderful partner coming to me. And so I did that for about 2 months. So I took a whole year off just loving myself. So I have a whole sacred self-love program that's also written in my book.
I love it.
Yep.
We're gonna have to get on it.
And then after the year was up, I was inspired to put my profile on Match.com. So I was very succinct, clear, exactly what I wanted, straight up honest. And I started attracting very different men than what I had dated in the past. And literally within about 3 weeks after putting my profile up on Match, I met my husband.
Oh,
Thank
congratulations.
you. Yeah, we've been married for over 16 years.
I love it.
And my little brother made that comment after he met my husband, and he just said, "You have met your match."
That's amazing.
Yep. And
That's
I call
amazing.
him my eternal divine partner because I didn't know what he was going to be, and I had to give him a name. So
Mm,
when I was creating him, and I mean creating him, visioning what this partnership was going to be, the things
yeah.
we were going to do together, how we were going to co-create and, support
Mhm.
each other and help him realize his dreams, him help me realize mine. Yeah.
That's such an amazing story. I just love it. I can't get enough of it because I mean, honestly, um sometimes we go through life with like, oh, I wish this or I wish that. But I've learned through live with affirmations, right? Like, I am going to make this happen. No one is in control of making this happening other than myself. So I think it's important for people to understand that once you start believing that it is possible, it will become possible, right? Because then you are working towards that you're seeking. Your circles start to change. Your energy starts to change. You become like, people always ask me, like, Monica, how do you do it? Like, you have so much going on. And I was like, yeah, I work a lot, but I am not like, yes, there are days that I'm exhausted, that I'm mentally done. But I'm working on the things that I set myself to do, because one day there was someone that told me you'll never get there. And I was like, well,
Ooh,
or there was someone that told me like, oh, you shouldn't work so much because it's not worth it, right? Or you should just do enough because it's just a paycheck. Or like, you spend all this time and energy, nobody cares, right? Like, the people tend to put you down, and you yourself then create all these barriers that don't really exist. And they are barriers that are just on your mindset, right? So while working in affirmations and working on, you use the laws of attraction, and everybody, uses a couple different things. But I think the most important part of it is that you believe it, and that you explore what's next. Like, don't conform to what you've been taught or people think that should be,
okay.
because you are your own person and you create your own environment and your own destiny. At least that's what I believe, right? So I am so like my mind is blown that you did that whole exercise, and in 3 weeks basically. I mean, not 3 weeks. You went
It
through a
took a
year.
year,
You
right?
went through a whole year. But like, after you decided, okay, I'm gonna take this step because I already know what I want, and this is exactly how it's going to happen.
Yes.
3 weeks, you got the result you wanted. So,
do,
people,
do you
it
see
works.
this?
Who's that?
So,
What is that?
so
Is that
th- this is a
a book?
journal,
Okay.
right? So this was the journal that after I spent a year with myself, right?
Yeah.
That I created a vision journal about my divine partner that I wanted to attract. All
That's
right.
amazing.
And Monica, just like you, the
Mhm.
affirmation at the top of every page is
Yeah.
I have an eternal love affair with my divine partner, and he has an eternal love affair with me.
Mhm.
And so, because I wanted to make sure you put yourself in it, right?
Yeah.
And so you can see all the pictures, all the different things that
I
was
love it.
seriously, I created this whole thing from my heart, and then I loved it for about 2 months. I would just meditate and just turn the pages, and like you said, visualize, see,
Yeah.
believe, right? Just like with every cell in my body that this was going to
Mhm.
come to me, right? That's why it happened so fast. Because one of the things about the law of attraction, right, is you step into inspired action.
Mhm.
And you know this, you don't just take action for action's sake, right?
Mhm.
It's like, what am I inspired to do next? And so that's what, I was inspired to put it on Match. It's like, okay.
Yeah. So how do we go about it? I guess is the question, Heather. Right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we go about it? Because not everybody's the same, right?
Correct.
Not everybody has the same behaviors or the same dedication or want to spend maybe more than 5 minutes doing things for, certain things. So, how can people go about creating and attracting what they want, love, jobs? How can they go about it? Can you give us a couple tips?
It's interesting because you were talking about not everybody wants to, spend the time.
Yeah.
And so I think the first question and this is the first tip, right? What do you really want?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want the love of your life? Do you want a great love experience? Do you want a partnership that will ensure that you are going to evolve and be your best self while you're here, and that you're going to be able to support them in being their best self? And I don't mean just good enough, right? I don't mean just enough to get by.
Yeah.
I love listening to your love story. So how much time is it worth to you to invest? And
Ah,
and and, and to be
tricky.
honest, well, and I'm going in, so from a tip standpoint, to really get honest with yourself, right? To the listeners, for really get honest with yourself, because there's one woman I've been talking with for quite some time, and she just keeps on swiping, and oh, they look cute, oh, I'll go out with them, and then upset because she doesn't have the love of her life. And I'm thinking, but look at the attention or the inattention you're actually giving it. I, it's like, ooh, right. Exactly. You're on mute there. We didn't get to hear that beautiful
I know.
whimper
I
you
was
were
like,
sharing.
I've never been. I have friends but I don't remember the name. Which one is the one you swipe?
Is it Tinder? No,
I don't know.
I don't
I
know which
think
one it
there's
is, but whatever. This
swipe
swipe
left
left
or
or
swipe
whatever.
life, or I've seen it in movies too. But my
Yes.
friends, some of my friends use them. They're single, um, and I was like, really? Is that how? Like, what if that person is a serial killer? Like, I always think about the worst, because I have been out of the dating scene for so long that I don't even know what's normal anymore.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh yeah, look, I can go anywhere." And I'm like, "Oh my lord. This is, like, how do you create trust that way, right? Like, you find them there. Like, how do you create trust that way? Like, I don't know. I have many questions. Like, we need to have like another session about
Question.
these specific things,
Yep.
about
Well,
dating in 2023 or
yeah.
2024. I don't know.
Yep.
Um,
I do have a chapter on how to date. So I do.
good.
So I am not, a therapist. I'm just a
Yeah.
woman like all the other women that are on your listening audience there, that has loved, that has been in pain around love, that has picked herself back up, that has gone for the best she can, right, in creating love. And people ask my husband and I all the time, you guys have such a great story, how can you share secrets that you have with other people? And one of the things I've done here in my book is at the end of every chapter I have introspection questions,
Mm-hmm.
so that people can ask themselves, because if they really want a true love, they will be willing to give more than 5 minutes on it. And
Yeah.
if anything, just ask more questions, be willing to ask more questions before you decide, or even ask, is he
Yeah.
Mr. Right? I just assume he's Mr. Right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
While you learn about each other, while you learn about yourself, right? And the other tip would be to, just write down a list. What are
Mhm.
the things that are your non-negotiables, right?
Yeah.
Like, they need to be drug free. Is that a non-negotiable? Yes or no?
Mhm.
you know, they need to be of the same, culture as mine. Yes or no? They need to be, right? whatever they either need to be or not, at least get clear with yourself what your own
Mhm.
non-negotiables are. I was talking with a woman earlier today, and she was sharing about the fact that she is with somebody and he really wants to be a dad. And I said, you didn't say you really wanted to be a mom.
Yeah.
And I said,
Interesting.
are you sure? Right? Like, just, you might want to just explore that, a
Mhm.
little bit first. Because some people have had children because the other person wants one, even though they don't. And,
Yeah.
and it can cause a lot of strain in a relationship. So that's
Mhm.
what I mean by, how do you just get honest with yourself about what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, what you're willing to partner with, and what you're not. Because you and I both know how painful divorce can be.
Yeah. 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 I mean, when I mean, when I got married the first time, I was a kid. Like I was a kid, and uh, it was a whole different situation where I was forced to get married. Right? Like it wasn't that I wanted to get married. And when I got divorced, then year or two later, I met my husband now, but I didn't marry him until like 3 years ago because that trauma was there, right? Like, if we separate, you go your way, I go my way. I don't want to go through the divorce thing again, like just whatever. And that trauma was there
Yes.
still for many years. We had a daughter. We've had like three houses or four at that point. Like we've gone through life,
Right.
do our thing, accomplish our goals. But signing that paper and getting into that, like it was not something neither of us wanted to do, especially me.
Mhm.
So some days I will walk in and it's like, oh, I want to get married. And then I didn't want to do the big wedding thing because then, I already did that and I don't want anybody involved.
Mhm.
So, I do recognize that having those non-negotiables and those I want, and these are things that, I am not willing to compromise on, are important. Like we establish one child. That's it. So every time the child conversations come into the, I was like, we agreed to one, and she's worth like 25. Like, so it is important to like, and also to protect yourself, right? How important is to protect your space? Like it is a balance, just like you mentioned. Like you need to be able to understand how you're going to keep being yourself and also being available for others. So, for those women listening today, what will be your best advice based on your story, based on your book, based on your experience?
My best advice for all of the wonderful women out there that are a part of your audience is going to be to, number one, love yourself first. Find out what you love about yourself, find out what you love to do, find out and love what your preferences are and what they're not, and just love everything about you and what you bring to the relationship. Because when your cup is full, then the relationship, you'll be able to attract amazing people.
I love it. I love it. That is truly amazing. And I think we failed a lot to do that sometimes. We forget. We forget to love ourselves. So I appreciate you, Heather, being here. I appreciate you sharing your story, bringing your book. We will add your book into our library. We have a library, so make sure that if you're listening today, that you support Heather, get her book. I'm interested of doing the workshop about self love and like bringing back yourself. I'm interested. I'm interested. I'm very interested on that.
Okay, Monica, I have an amazing self acknowledgement exercise that is transformational, and I would love to collaborate with you to create a virtual experience of that.
Yes.
Seriously, that would be
Let's do it.
fascinating. I'd love
Let's do
to.
it. Let's do it. We're going to chat after and we're going to do that because, regardless of where you are in life, I feel reconnecting with yourself is a necessity in all different seasons of your life, right? So I will love that actually. It will be amazing. So, thank you for being here, Heather. Thank you for sharing your amazing story, for being part of this amazing world that we form part of, and for just exist, because without people like you, where will we be sharing their stories, sharing their experiences, and helping others, making sure that they are on the right path and that they find love and that they feel love, right?
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Monica, it was a privilege. All right,
I
remember, it's your love story, nobody else's.
100%. Thank you so much and have a great night, everybody.